The mountain had no name on official maps. To the locals, it was called Chernath, which loosely translated to the peak that screams. The guides avoided it, the villagers avoided even looking at it, and even the goats and yaks that roamed the Himalayan foothills skirted its shadow. But when something is forbidden, it becomes irresistible. Arjun, a thrill-seeker and mountaineer from Delhi, had always searched for places uncharted, peaks untouched. He thrived on the arrogance of conquering what others feared. When he stumbled across an old mountaineering forum post about Chernath, claiming that climbers hear the voices of the dead up there, he laughed, bookmarked the page, and began to plan his expedition. By early winter, he had gathered a team. Sonia, his girlfriend, a filmmaker eager to document the climb for her growing horror YouTube channel. Dev, his best friend since college, reckless and sarcastic, but loyal. Maya, a medical student, nervous but fascinated by the supernatural stories. And Karen, a silent, brooding man from a nearby town, hired as their guide when others refused. The villagers warned them in hushed tones. "The mountain speaks. If you hear your mother's voice calling you from the snow, do not answer. If you hear laughter, run." Sonia recorded the warnings, smiling at the camera, while Arjun scoffed. "Perfect content," he whispered to her. "This video will blow up." The climb began normally. The air was thin, the snow crunching under their boots, the sky vast and merciless. But by the second night, unease crept in. They set up tents at the base of a ridge. The wind screamed as if alive, threading through cracks in the rocks. Sonia swore she heard her name whispered outside the tent, soft as her mother's voice calling from Delhi. She stepped out, shivering, holding her camera, but there was nothing except the night. Inside, Maya couldn't sleep. She heard what sounded like children laughing faintly in the snow, distant but circling their Qomam. Karan, the guide, sat awake by the lantern, muttering prayers under his breath. When Arjun asked him what was wrong, Karan finally spoke more than 2 words. "The mountain does not want us here. It remembers." Arjun laughed. "Mountains don't remember, Karan. Rocks don't have feelings." Karan didn't reply. He only stared at Arjun with tired eyes that carried a weight of something he wasn't saying. On the 3rd day, Dev disappeared. They had been scaling a narrow ridge when Dev claimed he heard someone calling his name from below. He insisted it was his brother's voice, his brother who had died 3 years ago. Against everyone's protests, Dev unclipped his rope and began descending toward the echo. "Dev, stop!" Sonia screamed. But he vanished into the fog, his laughter trailing as if he'd found something joyous. They called his name for hours. When the mist cleared, there was no trace of him, no footprints, and no body, nothing but the untouched snow. Maya broke down crying. Sonia kept the camera rolling, whispering, "If this is a prank, Dev, I swear I'll kill you when you come back." But Karan's face hardened. "The mountain has taken him. Once it calls you, there is no coming back." Arjun clenched his fist. "Number will find him. We're not turning back." And with those words, the mountain seemed to howl louder. That night, they all heard it, the voices. Sonia woke to her father's voice, calling her by her childhood nickname, "Gudia, come inside. It's cold out there." She nearly stepped into the snow barefoot before Maya dragged her back. Arjun swore he heard Dev laughing right outside the tent, whispering, "It's beautiful up here. Come see." Maya heard her late grandmother singing a lullaby. The tune echoed around them as though the snow itself carried it. But the worst was Karan. He sat motionless, eyes wide, whispering prayers, while the voice of his dead wife, long buried in the valley below, sobbed in the wind. "Why did you leave me? Come back." By dawn, none of them had slept. Despite their terror, Arjun pushed them forward. He had become obsessed with reaching the summit. His skin looked pale, his lips cracked, but his eyes burned with determination. "The voices are just in our heads," he said, forcing a grin. "Altitude sickness, hallucinations, that's all." But Sonia noticed something strange. The higher they climbed, the more the mountains seemed to shift. The ridges bent in ways that didn't make sense. Paths twisted back on themselves. Sometimes they would walk for hours only to find themselves staring at their abandoned campsite. The footprints erased as if the snow itself swallowed them. On the fifth day, they found a frozen body, a climber in old gear, half buried in ice. His mouth was open in a scream, his eyes wide, and his hands clutching his own throat as if trying to silence himself. His chest had been carved with symbols none of them recognized. But when Sonia zoomed her camera in, the cuts seemed fresh, as if the body hadn't aged a day despite being decades old. Karan whispered a single word: "Marked." The mountains seemed to breathe. The air itself felt thicker the higher they went. Not just from altitude, but from something else. Something alive and unseen. By the sixth day, the group had stopped speaking much. They walked in silence, heads down, listening. Always listening. The voices never left now. They were no longer faint whispers. They were clear, sharp, and personal. Sonia swore she could hear Dev walking just behind her, his boots crunching in the snow, his laughter in her ear. But every time she spun around, there was nothing. Maya had stopped eating. She muttered constantly under her breath, sometimes answering questions no one had asked. Karan grew more nervous, flinching at shadows that seemed to move in the fog. And Arjun seemed energized, almost feverish. His cheeks were red from the cold, but his grin never faltered. The others noticed how his eyes darted at the mist, as if he were seeing things none of them could. On the seventh morning, they found blood on the snow. A long trail of crimson drops leading up the ridge, fresh against the white powder. Sonia raised her camera, zooming in, her breath catching. It's Dev. It has to be." They followed. Hours passed. The trail went higher and higher until the wind screamed so loudly it drowned out their thoughts. The blood thickened into smears, like someone had been dragged. At last, they found him, or what was left. Dev's body was propped against a rock, frozen stiff. His eyes were gouged out, sockets black with frost. His lips were shredded into a grotesque grin, as if he had ripped them apart himself. But worst of all was his chest. Words were carved deep into his flesh. "Welcome back, Arjun." Maya vomited into the snow. Sonia screamed until her voice cracked. Karan whispered something in his own tongue, clutching a charm around his neck. And Arjun just stared. Not in horror, not in grief, but in fascination. "The mountain knows me," he murmured. It was waiting. That night, no one slept. The wind howled like 1,000 voices weeping, laughing, screaming. The tent walls shook as if something pressed against them, clawing to get in. Maya snapped in the middle of the night. She bolted outside barefoot, shrieking, "Grandma, I'm coming! Don't leave me here!" By the time Sonia and Karan chased after her, she had vanished into the white void. Her footprint stopped abruptly at the edge of a cliff, where the snow was perfectly undisturbed beyond. There was no body, only the echo of her screams, fading into laughter. Sonia collapsed, sobbing, "We're all going to die here." Karan pulled her close, his hands trembling. The mountain doesn't let you leave. Once you hear it, it owns you. Arjun sat silently, staring into the fog. A smile played on his lips. The next morning, Sonia confronted Karan. You knew. You knew what this place was, and you brought us here anyway. Karan's face was pale, aged by exhaustion and terror. Finally, he confessed. I lost my wife here. She came up this mountain, chasing voices of her family. I followed, but I couldn't save her. The mountain took her. Since then, I've guided no one. But when Arjun came, I thought, maybe if I returned, I could understand. Maybe I could see her again. Sonia's eyes widened. So you used us? Karan looked away, ashamed. I thought I was strong enough to resist, but I hear her every night. She calls my name. She weeps. If I go to her, I will never return. Before Sonia could respond, Arjun interrupted. His voice was unnervingly calm. The mountain doesn't take, it chooses. Don't you see? Dev, Maya, they weren't strong enough, but it's speaking to me. It's welcoming me. Sonia recoiled at his tone. His eyes gleamed unnaturally bright, as if reflecting some unseen light in the mist. That night was the worst. The tent ripped open from the outside, though nothing was there. The snow roared like a living sea, voices shrieking in dozens of tongues. Some cried for help, others laughed hysterically. Some whispered vile secrets that made Sonia's skin crawl. Karan tried to pray, but the words twisted in his mouth until he was muttering nonsense. His wife's voice grew louder and louder until he clamped his hands over his ears, screaming. And Sonia. Sonia saw shapes in the snow, figures of people, their skin blue and cracked, their mouths wide with screams. They moved in jerky motions, surrounding the camp. Among them, she recognized Dev. His eyeless sockets stared at her, and yet she knew he was looking through her, beyond her, into something deeper. She shut her eyes. When she opened them, the figures were gone. But Arjun was standing outside the tent, barefoot in the snow, arms raised as if in worship. His lips moved, but the wind drowned his words. By dawn, Sonia had made a decision. She told Karan, "We have to leave. We'll drag Arjun if we have to." But when they tried to pull him down the mountain, Arjun fought back. His strength was unnatural, his movements jerky, almost puppet-like. His voice was not just his own anymore. It layered with others, dozens, hundreds speaking through him. The mountain remembers. The mountain feeds. The mountain is forever. He grabbed Sonia's wrist, his nails digging into her flesh. "You can join us. You don't have to be afraid anymore." Karan struck Arjun with an ice axe, breaking his grip. Arjun fell to the snow, laughing, his blood soaking the white ground. But even as he bled, the snow hissed, as if drinking it. The wind roared. The mountain shook. And then, silence. Arjun's body was gone. Only his voice remained, echoing through the peaks. Welcome home. The world after Arjun's disappearance was not the same. The snow no longer looked like snow. It looked like skin, pale, cracked, stretched across the earth. The fog curled in tendrils, wrapping around Sonia and Karan as if pulling them back toward the summit. Still, they forced themselves downward. Sonia's hands were raw and bleeding from gripping the rope. Karan muttered broken prayers under his breath, his lips trembling. But no matter how far they climbed down, the landmarks never changed. The crooked boulder they had passed an hour ago appeared again. The ridge with a frozen pine tree stood waiting each time they thought they had escaped. It was as if the mountain was folding in on itself, a labyrinth of endless snow. Sonia's throat ached. "We're walking in circles," Karan shook his head, but his eyes gave him away. No, not circles. It's keeping us. That night, Sonia awoke to the sound of a bell ringing, a deep, resonant toll that vibrated in her bones. She crawled out of the tent, breath fogging in the air. And there it was, a small stone shrine in the snow. She swore it hadn't been there before. A rusted bell hung at its center, swinging though there was no wind. Beneath it sat offerings, bones, scraps of frozen meat, and torn clothing. Some of it was modern, ripped jackets, gloves, things left by climbers who had never returned. The bell rang again, louder. Karen stumbled out behind her, his face pale. We should not be here. But Sonia stepped closer. Something pulled at her mind, whispering through the toll. She saw Dev's face. She saw Maya's hand reaching for her. She saw her mother, smiling warmly, her eyes filled with tears. They're here. She lifted her hand to touch the bell. Karan yanked her back just in time. Don't listen! It's a trap! The voices vanished. The fog grew thicker, angry. The shrine crumbled into the snow, vanishing as if it had never been. But the ringing never stopped. It followed them. By the 12th day, food was gone. Their lips were cracked, their stomachs hollow. The cold gnawed at their marrow. Karan grew weaker, coughing blood into the snow. His eyes lost their light. Sonia dragged him, refusing to leave him, but he begged her. Sonia, listen to me. If you hear her voice, if you see her face, don't follow. Promise me. I won't leave you, she sobbed. He gave a faint smile. You might not have a choice. That night, Sonia awoke to silence. Karan was gone. His footprints led away from the tent, straight into the storm. She followed, screaming his name until her throat tore. When she finally found him, he was standing at the edge of a cliff. His wife's voice filled the air, soft, loving. He turned to Sonia, tears freezing on his cheeks. She's here. She's waiting. Before Sonia could stop him, Karan stepped forward. His body vanished into the white void below. The wind howled, carrying his voice upward. Come home, Sonia. Alone now, Sonia's mind cracked. The mountain no longer hid itself. Shadows walked openly in the mist. Men and women with torn faces, eyeless sockets, jaws dislocated into impossible smiles. They circled her camp, whispering in voices she knew. Her camera still worked, though the battery was low. She filmed everything, shaking, weeping. Into the lens, she whispered, My name is Sonia Sharma. If anyone finds this, we weren't the first. We won't be the last. The mountain, it eats us. Don't come here. Don't. Her words cut off as something moved behind her. A tall shape, stretched unnaturally thin, its head crooked sideways, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. The footage ended there. Weeks later, a rescue team found fragments of equipment near the base of the mountain. A half-buried tent, a broken axe, and a camera, lens cracked, but memory card intact. They reviewed the footage. The last frame froze on Sonia's tear-streaked face, her mouth open in a scream as something loomed behind her. Her body was never found. Neither was Karan's. But sometimes, when climbers dare to venture near those cursed peaks, they claim to hear a woman's voice calling from the snow. Sometimes she begs for help. Sometimes she laughs. And sometimes she whispers your name. Story 2. The Frozen Monastery. Part 1. The Beginning. The Expedition. In 1987, a mountaineering group led by Professor Raghav Iyer, a historian obsessed with ancient Himalayan myths, set out to climb a remote, unnamed peak near the Tibet-India border. The locals called it Charnel Ridge, but refused to say why. Whenever asked, they only muttered, "Not mountain, graveyard." Raghav, however, wasn't interested in superstitions. He had uncovered fragments of manuscripts describing a monastery lost in the snow, where monks practiced rituals of hollowing to achieve immortality. He convinced 5 others to join him. Leela, his bright-eyed research assistant. Harish, an ex-soldier who handled logistics. Anita and Raj, married photographers seeking rare landscapes. Father D'Souza, a Jesuit priest curious about the legends. Together, they ignored the warnings and began their climb. The first week was brutal. The air grew thinner, the cold sharper. But it was the silence that unsettled them most. No birds, no wind, not even the distant rumble of avalanches. One night, Anita woke screaming. She claimed she saw men walking outside their camp, barefoot in the snow, their ribs jutting out like cages. But when they checked, no footprints remained. The next day, Raj found bones near a crevasse. Human femurs, hundreds of them, stacked neatly like firewood. Some were drilled clean through, hollow as flutes. Father D'Souza paled. "This is no burial ground. This is harvest." Raghav only smiled. "We're close." On the 10th day, the fog parted, and they saw it. A monastery carved into the mountain face, its black stone walls half buried in ice. Towers jutted like broken teeth. Prayer flags snapped in a wind that didn't touch their camp. They climbed to the gates, which hung open, frozen hinges groaning. The wood was stained dark, as if soaked in something thicker than water. Inside, the monastery was perfectly preserved. Long halls lined with statues of monks, faces serene, hands folded. But each statue was carved not of stone, but compressed bone. Thousands of skeletons melted together. Leela whispered, "Dear God." But the professor's eyes glittered. "No. Not God. Knowledge." That night, Raghav found a scroll room, its shelves packed with brittle parchment. The text was written in a language he didn't recognize, yet he could understand it. The words burned into his skull as if whispered directly by the walls. The monks believed flesh was weakness. To ascend, they hollowed themselves, carving out organs, drilling through bones, until their bodies became vessels. The hollowness allowed the mountain spirit to inhabit them. Some ascended, some did not. Those who failed were entombed within the monastery walls. Harish spat, "This is madness. We need to leave." But Raghav only laughed, manic, shaking with discovery. Immortality is never pretty. On the 13th day, Raj vanished. His boots were still in the tent. His jacket hung neatly on a hook. Yet his camera was gone, along with him. They searched the monastery halls, shouting until their throats bled. At last, Anita found the camera on the altar of the main temple. The last photos chilled them. A shot of the group, sleeping in their tent. A shot of Harish, urinating outside. A shot of Anita herself, taken from just behind her shoulder. The final photo was of Raj's face, mouth open in terror, something long and white sliding into his throat. But Raj himself was nowhere to be found. After Raj vanished, the group's unity fractured. Anita sobbed quietly, clutching his scarf. Harish insisted they abandon the monastery and head back. But Raghav's obsession only deepened. At night, they began hearing chanting, low guttural tones that echoed through the stone halls. It never came from the same direction. Sometimes it seemed directly behind them, yet when they turned, only shadows stretched across bone-carved walls. Leela swore she saw a monk kneeling in the corner of their room, but when Harish swung his flashlight, the figure dissolved into the wall, leaving behind a faint scent of rot. Anita stopped eating. She spent hours staring at Raj's recovered camera, replaying the images. One night, she woke screaming, tearing at her throat with her nails. "They're inside me. The hollowing has begun." They restrained her, but she only laughed hysterically. She pointed at Raghav. He let them in. He reads their words. He belongs to them now. The next morning, Anita was gone. No footprints in the snow. Only her camera remained. The last picture was taken in pitch black, yet a faint outline could be made out. A towering figure made entirely of ribs and skulls, cradling her like a child. Raghav refused to leave. He had translated more of the scrolls and claimed the monks had discovered a ritual to separate spirit from body. They hollowed themselves so the mountain could use them as vessels. "Don't you see? Death is not the end here. It's transformation." Father D'Souza spat at him. "You're speaking with devils." But Raghav smiled. If devils hold eternity, then so be it. The priest grew weaker each day. He claimed he could hear the voices of the monks, whispering prayers inside his skull. "They want us hollow. That's their gospel. They strip away flesh, bone, will, until nothing remains but a shell." That night, Harish found him kneeling in the temple, arms spread, chest sliced open with a ritual knife. His ribs were cracked wide, his heart gone. But his lips were still moving, murmuring chants in a voice not his own. Harish ended it with a bullet, but the sound echoed too long, bouncing like 100 voices laughing in the dark. Only Raghav, Leela, and Harish remained. Leela begged to leave, but Raghav refused. "We are so close. The ritual must be completed." Then Leela began coughing blood. Harish held her as she convulsed. When he pried open her mouth, he saw her teeth loosening, falling out, leaving empty holes that bled endlessly. Her scream was cut short as something long and pale pushed through her throat, not flesh, but a slick, polished bone forcing its way up from inside her. Harish dragged her from the temple, but she was no longer Leela. Her eyes were blank. Her chest rattled like a flute with every breath. She whispered in a hollow voice, "Join us." "Be empty," Harish snapped. He smashed the scrolls, tore down bone statues, and set fire to the monastery's entrance hall. "You're all dead already," he screamed at Raghav. But Raghav only smiled, standing in the flames like a prophet. "They cannot die, neither will I." When the fire died, the monastery still stood, untouched. The flames had blackened Harish's skin, yet the walls of bone gleamed pristine. That night, Harish vanished too. Only his rifle remained, placed neatly on the altar. Raghav was now the last. Raghav no longer feared the monastery. It felt alive around him, pulsing with a rhythm like a heartbeat. The walls whispered encouragement. The bone statues leaned closer as he passed. He wrote feverishly in his journal, describing the gift of the hollowing. The monks shed their fragile vessels and became the mountain itself. "I too shall ascend. I will not wither as dust. I will echo forever." He no longer ate, no longer slept. His cheeks sank, eyes rimmed black, skin gray like stretched parchment. But his voice was strong. Too strong. When he spoke, the walls trembled, as if dozens of voices spoke with him. Deeper in the monastery, beyond collapsed tunnels, Raghav found a circular chamber carved entirely from bone. The walls were embedded with thousands of skulls, each mouth agape. The floor was slick with frozen blood. At the center stood a throne fashioned from ribs. Upon it sat the largest skeleton he had ever seen, nearly 12 feet tall, crowned with a mask of polished bone. Its chest cavity was open, ribs spiraling outward like jagged wings. The monks called it the first hollow. Raghav knelt before it, trembling with reverence. "Take me," he whispered. "Make me one with you." He slit his own arm and smeared blood across the throne. The skull mouths rattled, releasing a choir of moans. The giant skeleton's chest cavity opened wider, exposing an endless void. A black wind rushed from it, pulling at his skin, tugging his breath. Bones sprouted from his flesh, forcing through his arms, his jaw. His ribs cracked outward from the inside, peeling him open. His screams were swallowed by the choir. The mountain was hollowing him. When it ended, Raghav was no longer Raghav. His skin hung loosely, draped over a scaffolding of foreign bone. His eyes were empty sockets, yet he could see everything. Every tunnel, every chamber, every bone fragment within the monastery pulsed in his mind. He was not one voice, but many. He had joined the choir. The monastery had gained a new vessel. Weeks later, a rescue team arrived searching for the missing expedition. They never reported what they found, only fragments. A burned rifle, a tattered journal filled with impossible drawings, and photographs too dark to interpret. Of the team, no trace was ever recovered. But local villagers say that when storms roll across the peaks, you can hear voices carried in the wind. They say one of them is a woman crying for Raj. Another is a priest reciting broken prayers. And among them all, clear and commanding, is the voice of Professor Raghav, whispering, "Be empty, be eternal." Locals refused to say its name at night. The ridge cut a jagged scar across the northern Himalayas, higher than the surrounding peaks, darker even in daylight. Climbers called it the Black Ridge because the stone looked scorched, as if fire had licked it centuries ago and left it permanently charred. Legend swirled that no climber had returned unchanged. Some vanished completely. Others staggered back, frostbitten and half-mad, their eyes black and unfocused, whispering words in a language no one recognized. Still, the forbidden called to men like Arun, a young climber with more ambition than caution. Arun's team was small. Arun, leader, eager to make history by summiting the Black Ridge. Mira, experienced mountaineer, skeptic of superstition. Kabir, documentarian, recording the climb for a web series. Dinesh, Sherpa guide, quiet but uneasy about the mountain. They set out in late November, the season most fatal for climbs. Snow fell thick, muffling sound, and winds keened like mourners across the valleys. On the third night, they camped at the base of the ridge. Kabir filmed everything, narrating by the fire. "This mountain hasn't been climbed in recorded history. Locals believe it eats people. We're here to prove that's just a story." Dinesh's face twisted at that. "Not story," he muttered. "Shadow lives here. Ridge not stone. Ridge is mouth." The others laughed nervously. The climb began smoothly, but within hours the signs appeared. Their compasses spun without settling. The GPS trackers showed them looping back to the same coordinates. At dusk, Arun swore he saw a line of figures above them, climbing parallel, silhouetted against the storm. But when he shouted, no one else saw them. By the fifth day, Mira reported hearing footsteps behind her when the group was still. Kabir dismissed it as echoes. But when he replayed his recordings at night, faint voices bled through the audio, voices not belonging to anyone in the group. That night, they camped on a plateau halfway up the ridge. Snow hammered the tent walls, wind shrieking like something alive. When Arun woke at dawn, Kabir was gone. His sleeping bag was zipped, his boots missing, but no prints trailed from the tent. Just untouched snow. The only clue was Kabir's camera, propped outside on a tripod. It was still recording, lens coated in frost. Aaron pressed play. The footage showed Kabir stepping out in the night, staring up at the ridge. His face was slack, eyes unblinking. He dropped his gloves, spread his arms, and walked barefoot into the storm. No fear, no hesitation. The last thing the camera caught was Kabir stopping mid-snowfield, lifting his face to the mountain and whispering in a guttural voice, "I'm home." Mira panicked, insisting they turn back. Dinesh begged them not to continue, but Arun, obsessed, argued, "This is proof. Something's here, and we'll be the first to document it." The others reluctantly followed. The mountain loomed above them, its cliffs veined with black stone that seemed to absorb light. That night, when Arun dreamed, he saw Kabir. Not frozen, not dead, but standing among shadow-thin figures on the ridge, their faces blank. They raised their hands in unison, beckoning. When Aaron woke, snow had drifted into the tent through a tear in the canvas. The tear wasn't from wind. It was the shape of a hand pressed into the fabric, fingers long, unnaturally thin. The morning after Kabir's disappearance, the air felt heavier. Even Mira, usually rational, admitted the snow seemed to press inward, like the mountain itself was closing around them. Dinesh muttered prayers under his breath as he packed. His hands shook so badly he dropped the ice axe twice. "Something here doesn't want us," Mira whispered to Arun. Arun's lips were cracked, his eyes bloodshot from sleeplessness, yet his obsession burned hotter than frostbite. "If Kabir found something," he said, "we have to see it too. We'll prove this ridge isn't just a myth." But Mira saw it in him. He didn't want proof anymore. He wanted whatever Kabir had walked into. They resumed the climb, tethered together with rope. For hours, snow blinded them, wind screeching like human cries. At one point, Mira shouted, "Stop!" Through the flurries, she saw footprints crisscrossing the slope, barefoot, leading upward, vanishing into the ice wall. Dinesh pulled at Arun's sleeve. "Those are Kabir's. He walked here. He's ahead." But Arun's face twisted into a smile. "No, look closer. There are dozens of tracks. More than just him." The prints weren't spaced like living steps. Some were wide, sprawling, as if people had crawled. Others pressed too deep, like something heavier than bone had walked on human feet. Night fell before they could set another camp. Exhausted, they dug a snow cave for shelter. Mira lit the lantern, shadows trembling on the icy walls. Dinesh curled in his sleeping bag, mumbling in Nepali, "Not men, not ghosts, shadows. They live in the stone." When Mira woke hours later, the lantern was dead and the cave was silent. Dinesh was gone. No collapsed snow, no signs of struggle, only his rope, severed clean as if by a blade. Aaron didn't even look surprised. He leaned against the wall of the cave, smiling faintly in the dark. He answered the call. The next day, the mountain seemed to change shape. Ridges shifted. Familiar paths looped back on themselves. At one point, Mira swore she saw their own snow cave again below them, though they'd been climbing in the opposite direction for hours. The wind carried whispers, not just vague howling, but words, broken and guttural. "Come, come higher, you belong." Mira tried covering her ears, but the voices seemed to rise from inside her skull. When she turned to Aaron, she froze. His eyes had changed. The whites were darkening, veins spidering across them like cracks in glass. and he was smiling, always smiling. By the 10th day, they reached the upper cliffs. Here, snow no longer clung. The mountain was bare, slabs of black rock that seemed to drink the sun. Touching it made Mira's skin prickle as if she'd laid her palm on a living thing. Aran placed both hands on the rock, closed his eyes, and sighed in pleasure. "It's warm," he whispered. But when Mira touched it, she recoiled. The stone was freezing, colder than ice, burning her skin raw. That night, she dreamed of Dinesh and Kabir standing on the ridge above, their mouths open unnaturally wide. Instead of teeth, the black stone jutted from their gums. She woke to find Arun gone from the tent. She scrambled out into the wind, snow biting her face. Arun stood barefoot on a ledge, shirtless, arms outstretched to the mountain. His body was shivering violently, lips blue, but he didn't seem to notice. The black stone behind him was shifting, almost pulsing. From within the cracks in the cliff, figures pressed outward, dozens of them, their skin translucent, their faces featureless, mouths gaping. Their limbs bent wrong, folding like broken twigs. Aaron turned to her. His eyes were entirely black now. "They want me," he whispered. "They've always wanted me." Then he stepped backward into the stone, and the stone swallowed him. After Aaron vanished into the stone, silence devoured the mountain. No wind, no crunch of snow, only Mira's ragged breathing. She screamed his name, the sound bouncing against cliffs, swallowed by black rock. No echo came back. Her rope, her gear, her tent, all gone. She was standing alone in the open snow, as if the mountain had stripped her of anything human. Her body screamed to descend, but every path downward blurred into mist. No trail remained, only upward. The black ridge would not let her go. Hours bled into days. She climbed with nothing but a broken ice axe. Snow no longer melted on her tongue. Even water tasted of metal. Her stomach cramped, but the mountain fed her something else, a humming, a vibration in her bones that numbed hunger. At night, she dreamed of Kabir and Dinesh again. This time they were closer, their jaws slack, black veins pulsing under their skin. They didn't speak, but their eyes, dark, bottomless holes, pulled her deeper into sleep. When she woke, she found her nails cracked and bleeding. She had clawed at the stone all night, carving lines in the rock like she was trying to get inside it. The hidden summit. On the 12th day, the blizzard cleared. Ahead was a summit, but no such peak should exist. The black ridge was said to plateau, unfinished. Yet here stood a tower of stone, jagged like broken teeth piercing the sky. Mira dragged herself upward. Each step felt guided. The whispers grew louder, not wind anymore, but thousands of voices overlapping. Closer, closer, you are ours. At the top, she found a plateau carved into a circle. In the center, a pit gaped open, ringed with skeletal remains, half buried in ice. The bones weren't all human. Some were twisted, elongated, jointed, wrong. The pit pulsed like a wound. The mountain was alive. Mira stumbled to the edge. The pit wasn't empty. Faces writhed in the stone, hundreds of them, some ancient, some fresh. Kabir's, Dinesh's, Aaron's. Their mouths opened, moaning soundlessly, eyes stretched wide in agony. The truth hit her. The black ridge didn't kill. It absorbed. Every climber who vanished here hadn't died. They had been swallowed, their souls imprisoned in the rock, feeding the mountain. The stone was a graveyard of consciousness, and now it wanted hers. The ground shook. Cracks spidered out beneath her boots. From the pit, arms clawed upward. Not flesh, but stone shaped like flesh, dragging themselves free. Mira screamed, stumbled back. The arms reached, scraping her clothes, pulling her towards the edge. The sky above turned black. The air thickened with the smell of rot. Her ears filled with Arun's voice, whispering, "Join me. It doesn't hurt anymore." In that moment, she had one choice: fall into the pit and become part of the ridge, or fight against something eternal. She swung her broken ice axe, severing stone fingers as they reached for her. With a final scream, she drove the axe into her own thigh. Pain tore her back into her body, breaking the trance. The mountain shrieked. The faces in the stone convulsed. For the first time, she heard them scream in unison, rage, not welcome. Mira stumbled away, half limping, blood freezing on her leg. The summit shifted. The pit collapsed in on itself. When she turned, the peak was gone, as if it had never existed. She crawled down the ridge. Hours later, she blacked out. When she woke, she was in a rescue hut far below. Locals had found her wandering half-naked in the snow. But she knew the mountain had let her go. Not out of mercy, but because something came back with her. At night, in the rescue hut, she could still hear the whispers in her skull. When she looked into the frost on the window, her reflection wasn't hers anymore. Behind her eyes, something black was moving. The black ridge doesn't just swallow. Sometimes it sends pieces of itself down with the survivors.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe. Was it paranormal or just something we can't explain? Share your thoughts in the comments and remember, never watch alone at night.